Hello. Welcome back to my haunted library. It's Regina. Hope you're doing well. I'm about to go on a vacation and I'm very excited. So this will be the last video I post for a week, probably 2 weeks. And I'm going out to Portland, Oregon and Washington State to visit my sister. And I'm taking my husband and I'm also taking Lily. So that ought to be interesting. Being on a 6 hour flight with a little Shih Tzu who can, let's face it, be a whiny little, you know what, sometimes it's going to be crazy, but I had to bring her with me. I won't be doing a video, but if you want to follow my vacation, I don't know why you would, but just in case, you can follow me on Instagram at xlibusregina, and I'll be posting my adventures. I do plan on going to Pal's Books, like I always do when I'm in Portland, and doing a bit of a book haul. I'm also going to the Oregon Scream Week Film Festival, where my screenplay, Unmasked, is not only an official selection, but it's also up for an award. But even if I don't win, it's been an honor to be nominated. Okay, but let's get into today's video. So this is the mid-year book Freak Out tag. I don't know who started this tag. If you know, please put it in the comments below. I've been seeing it around the booktube community for years now. But I thought it would be fun to do it, and it would be a nice kind of wrap up before I go away. So stick around to the end of the tag as well, because I'm going to be doing a short review of Richard Laymon's Into the Dark with clips from Lydia from Typical Books and Marie McWilliams, with whom I did a buddy read back in May. So we're finally kind of putting that together. But let's get on with the show. Whoops. So far this year I've read 34 books, which is quite a lot for me. Usually I read about 50 books a year, which is a lot too, but I feel like I'm ahead of schedule. And I don't even think this is counting all the books I've listened to. Okay, so let's get to the questions. Number one, best book you've read so far this year. That would have to be Bram Stoker's Dracula. I didn't read it, but I listened to it on audiobook, and this is probably the third time I've actually, read it or listened to it. Really enjoyed it. This was like early spring, like late winter. During my walks, I would put it on, and it just was so hauntingly beautiful. It really brought the book to life for me. So that's one of those books that I'll reread every few years, but I love the audiobook, and I'm really glad that I listened to it, because I think that's why a classic is a classic. You can read it or hear it many times, and you're always going to get something out of it. So number two, what is the best sequel I've read this year? I'm going to go with the V.C. Andrews / Andrew Niederman book, and that is Darkest Hour, which is the last book in the Cutler series, which begins with Dawn. This final book in this series I thought was amazing, and it was one of my favorite books of the year. All right, so number three, new release you haven't read yet but want to. I am really not the booktuber that's up on the new releases, I'm afraid to say. As much as I've tried, I just don't really have that capacity. But I think Grady Hendrix has a new book that's either out or coming out called Final Girl Support Group. I don't know. I saw it on Goodreads. I'm sure I'll read that sometime this year, but I'm usually a couple years behind the new releases. Number four, most anticipated new release for the second half of the year. Again, I'm not big on the new releases, but I believe Cameron Chaney has a new Autumn Crow coming out, maybe a sequel. I don't know. If he does, I'm definitely down for that. I'll read that. Number five, the biggest disappointment so far is probably a book I just recently DNF'd, which is Robopocalyse by Daniel H. Wilson. I bought that book a couple of years ago, and it's been sitting on my shelf, and I was reading some science fiction stuff, and I'm like, I'm going to finally read this book. And it started out pretty good. It's about the robots have taken over, and it's like the human being against robots, like a war. It sounds really fun. It sounds like a good action film or whatever. But I got about halfway through, and every chapter is a different POV, and I just kind of got bored with that setup, and I don't know. I just stopped reading it, and I didn't feel that bad about it. So yeah, that was a disappointment. I was hoping that would turn out to be something that I really loved. It could have just been I wasn't in the mood for it. I don't know. Number six, biggest surprise was In the Dark by Richard Laymon, because I didn't expect to like that book as much as I did. Having read a few other Laymon novels, I thought, oh, it's going to be more panties and romps and this type of thing. And it was that, but it also had a great story. So yeah, I was surprised in a good way. Number 7, favorite new author or debut or new to you. I'm going to go with 2. One was a Robert Ford. I read his book, Burner. Now, he's not a new author. He's been around for a long time, but this is the only novel I've read of his. I read a couple short stories. He's really good. This isn't usually the type of story I enjoy because it's very extreme horror, which is really not my thing. And it's kind of like, the woman trapped in the basement being tortured kind of story. But the way he told it and the details and the depth of his writing, I thought was really excellent. So I would read another one of his books again. The second one was a classic author, sci-fi author, who I believe is deceased, and that is Octavia Butler, and I've never read anything that she had written before, and I finally read a book called Dawn, not the V.C. Andrews one, and really enjoyed it and enjoyed her telling of the story, her voice. So I will continue to read that author, both of those authors. All right, what else? Newest fictional crush. Well, it's not a new one, it's an old one, and that's Count Dracula. And while I was reading Dracula or listening to it, I kept envisioning the Gary Oldman Dracula from Bram Stoker's Dracula, the film, and I've always had a big crush on him. So yeah. Number 9, favorite character. I'm going to go with Lillian from The Darkest Hour by V.C. Andrews because I really got into her character. And even though she was this horrible, evil person, by going back to her Genesis story, if you want to call it that, I learned about what made her so evil and how her abuse then turned into other family abuses, which of course happens, unfortunately. All right, number 10, book that made you cry. Again, Darkest Hour, because it did make me cry. I really got into that, and actually I want to reread it. I think it would make a great just like standalone film. It's so good, and in that melodramatic way. So number 11, book that makes you happy. I'm going to again go with Darkest Hour because a book that makes me cry makes me happy, if that makes sense. It's like if it moves me in an emotional way and I'm really gripped by the story so much that it makes me cry, that makes me happy because that's what I want when I read a book. I want to have that intense experience. Number 12, most beautiful book you've bought so far this year or received. So the most beautiful book that I bought this year is probably 12 Nights at Rotherhouse by J.W. Ocker. The book is great looking, but I have not cracked it yet, but I will. I loved the cover, the hardback cover with the old-fashioned writing and the blood spatters. It's really very nicely designed book. And I've heard it was really good, but have I read it yet? No. All right, number 13, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? Except for maybe finishing up the Landry series, the V.C. Andrews, I'm not putting that kind of pressure on myself because when I do, it takes away the fun of the reading experience. I've just accepted the fact that I'm a mood reader. I made that confession and I'm not going back. Otherwise, sometimes if I put that pressure on myself to do a TBR or a stack of books, then it becomes like a syllabus and a homework assignment and not something I do just for the pure joy and pleasure of it. So I'm not putting that pressure on myself. I refuse to answer that, except for a little more V.C. Andrews, which I would like to get to. Okay, so those were the tag questions. Now to discuss In the Dark by Richard Laymon. All right, so In the Dark by Richard Laymon is a novel about a woman named Jane who's a librarian, and she is led on this scavenger hunt for different clues, and each time she finds a new clue, she gets more money, and each clue, the amount of money increases, but also the danger does as well. She's also having kind of a dangerous flirtation with the master of games, who's the one behind this scavenger hunt. The story kind of reminded me of the movie The Game with Michael Douglas, which I love that movie. It's kind of the same thing. The stakes get higher with each clue, and it gets more dangerous, and she becomes almost infatuated with the master of games. And then she also has this boyfriend along with her, and he's kind of a new relationship she just met at the beginning of this whole thing. And there's an idea of like, can she trust him? Is he the master of games pretending to be someone else, and all this stuff? So it really is a fun book, great climax, really gory, fun story. So it kind of made me want to go back and read more Richard Laymon. And I think Lydia and Marie pretty much felt the same way I did about this book, and it was fun doing the buddy read with them. So let's see what Lydia and Marie had to say about this book. So let's cut to their clips right now.
Hi there. This is part of the buddy read that I did with Regina at Regina's Haunted Library, and Alex at the Bookubus, and Marie McWilliams, and Marissa at Harpies in the Trees. And this is Richard Laymon's In the Dark. This was one of the first Richard Laymon books that I had ever read. When I had a friend who owned all of the Richard Laymon books, and she discovered that I had never read any, although I was a huge horror reader. It was, oh, you simply must. Here are 10 books. So the first few that she gave me included this and like The Beast House and I believe One Rainy Night. I'm never clear if I have read that. I know the premise of it. Island was one of them. So there was a lot of books there. Oh, and Steak. And I read those and devoured them and then returned them and borrowed more. But nothing quite stuck with me like In the Dark because of the main character, not Jane, not Brace, but the Master of Games. Jane the librarian discovers clues in books in her library that lead her to money and adventure, but weird little trespassing kind of adventures. And there is a theme in a lot of Richard Laymon books with like cities at night and going into places that you recognize in the day that look very different and are very scary at night, and taking people out of their comfort zone, be it students, librarians, doctors, whatever, and putting them in the bush or putting them in the streets or putting them underneath overpasses at night. Something really creepy and just totally uncomfortable for them. That's his favorite thing to do to his main characters, and it is no exception with Jane the librarian. There are a few oddities with Richard Laymon books. Of course, you will notice a lot of tight sweaters and firm rumps. He uses the word rump over 30 times in this book, I believe. I hit a wall with reading, not this book, but Richard Laymon books. Many of them. Same wall I hit when I read 5 Harry Potter books back to back. You just can't take any more of that voice. It's a bad idea to read maybe 10 Richard Laymons back to back, because those things that make it fun to read one book, his mentions of what people are wearing. He knows a lot about women's clothing, talks about that a lot, and talking about rumps and perky breasts or whatever, it really wears thin. One book at a time, though, it is adorable. It's fun. And there is something to be said for a man writing through a male gaze of a woman character. He writes a lot of women characters, and they're all very strong and very intelligent, all of them. They all also fixate on their body image, and Jane is no exception. So it sort of detracts a little bit from the building of this character, but of course it was written long before, and he himself, Richard Laymon, was a hero among horror authors in many ways, and he was a gentle, kind, wonderful soul. When you see a picture of Richard Laymon, you may mistake him for an accountant. He doesn't look like this brusque, soulless person that would write this gory stuff with weirdly written women. He is a teddy bear and loved his wife and daughter and held them up on pedestals and other women around him, from what I understand. So yeah, he passed away and his family takes care of his estate. So I'm hoping that when I read the ebook of this, that they got some money, and no one at Leisure, because there was all of these published by Leisure Horror back in the day. So hopefully someone saw the proper amount of money, because he had so many books with them. The most imaginative thing, and the thing that stuck with me the most, is the Master of Games. So Jane, the librarian, bumps into not only notes left in books in her library, but also a boyfriend type, Brace, who serves as an immediate red herring. The Master of Games is this mystery character who's leaving her notes, signing them with nothing more than Master of Games, or Mog. So you come to call this person the Mog. And it feels weird and it sounds weird, but he's a weird dude, trust me. That really stuck with me, and I've never really read anything quite as imaginative. When I was asked to write a story for the Wicked Library about like a haunted library or something, it's like, okay, now don't write Mog. Don't rewrite In the Dark. Don't go with I found a secret note in a book and then it led me on this adventure, because it's been done and it's been done by a master and it was super fun and had twists and turns that were unexpected. So I didn't go into this like no one should go into Laymon expecting like really touching, literary, thought-provoking horror. It's fun. It's B-slasher sort of stuff. It gets very grotesque. So that is also one thing that I do love about Richard Laymon. So I hope that anyone else that has read this, and the girls that have read it alongside me, had as much fun as I did revisiting this wonderful little book. I don't know if this has been made into a movie. I have a feeling that it has, but I think that it would make a really fun one. Although a very racy one, they may have to cut out some of the real creepy gore, weird insanity that happens near the end.
Hello, my fellow weirdos. It's me, Marie. I am part of the read-along for this Richard Laymon book, In the Dark, and I'm here to give you my 10 cents about it. Is it 10 cents or 2 cents? My monetary opinion. So overall, I have to say, I really enjoyed this book. It's a really fun premise, it's an entertaining read, it's pretty decently paced with lots of action and things happening, and it doesn't necessarily go the way you think it's going to go. In fact, the ending was not at all what I thought it was going to be. But I do have a couple of issues, criticisms, things. First of all, Jane Honey, the librarian, the main character. Are you okay, hon? Are you okay? Like, don't get me wrong, if I got a kind of like treasure hunt clue with a bit of money in it and the implication there would be more money, and I might follow the clues for a bit. But as soon as it started getting even like slightly dangerous, even just a tiny bit, I would be like, nope. I would be noping out of there, because no amount of money is worth like mutilation by a brutal dog, or being murdered while you're lying dozing in a coffin half naked, or whatever that particular task led to. I just feel like I was a little confused by her motivation. The money alone didn't make sense to me, because it wasn't dealing with enough money to justify the danger she was putting herself in. And I get that they were trying to imply that she was kind of addicted to it, the thrill, the adrenaline. And I kind of get adrenaline junkie type things, but this woman's like a librarian. She doesn't seem stupid, but she behaves like she is. And I just find it very... I just made that face a lot when I was reading. So yeah, I think it would have made more sense to me if there had been another motivational factor. Like, for example, she owed money to the wrong person, or she had a relative who was sick and she needed the money to save their life or something. Something that made the money like vitally important. Then it maybe would have been a little bit more believable. But I was just very confused a lot. I was confused a lot by that. Other issues I had was that I enjoyed the book. Like I said, Richard Laymon is a great writer, but at the same time, he describes everything. Everything. Like, in a lot of stories, you'll just have, you know, she pulled into the driveway, and when she settled into bed that night, she thought about that day's events and wondered if tomorrow she would survive. I don't know, something like that. But in his book, the way he writes, it's like, she pulled into the driveway. She got out of her car, walked to the door, and placed her keys in the lock. She turned the lock slowly and opened the handle to enter the house, making her way sadly and slowly up the stairs to bed, where she pulled back the covers after getting changed and lay down. And it's like, dude, I don't need a description of like absolutely everything she did step by step by step by step by step. If you tell me that she's got home and now she's in bed, I can kind of like fill in the gaps myself. So I find that very strange. I've never read an author who included every step that the protagonists and characters take along the way, no matter how menial and minor. So I find that a bit strange. Also, he's like obsessed with weight, and this character is just constantly going on about how she's not skinny anymore and how she's put on a few pounds and like her body dysmorphia, because she doesn't actually sound like she's much bigger than me, and like it's just like fat shaming, and it's just very, I don't know, I think you can tell that it's a man writing a woman's perspective, if that makes sense. First of all, she talks about her vagina constantly. And her little triangle of fair hair down there. Like, she's just naked all the time, thinking about sex all the time, talking about her vagina all the time. Everything is related back to her vagina. And yeah, just constantly thinking about how she could really use with like losing a few pounds. I mean, I know that I nearly died the other night. And then I'm being stalked by this like psycho guy, this gamer, psycho gamer, who's like paying me to do really obscenely dangerous things, and I'm totally going along with it. But at the same time, I really could use a few, like losing a few pounds. Like, it just, I don't know, it just didn't come across like a realistic woman to me. Yeah, I find that a bit, it was just a little bit much for me at times. You know, she can have a thing about weight if that's part of the story, if it drags the story on a little bit. You know, like Drag Me to Hell, for example, where a lot of the metaphors in the horror are related back to her eating disorder. But in this, it just felt unnecessary. And like Richard Laymon just assumes that that's what women think about all the time, like their weight loss. So yes, a little bit of an issue with that as well. I also felt like Tom was a bit of a weird character because he just kind of kept going along with things, and I would have been like, woman, you're crazy, I'm out. But okay, that's what we needed to move the story on. Overall, like I said, I did genuinely enjoy it. It's a fun, entertaining read. It's a good concept. It's action-packed. It's just not necessarily going to be my favourite book, and I'm not necessarily going to be rushing to read more Richard Laymon immediately. Down the line, I probably will. But yeah, I think sometimes men should maybe just stick to reading from men's perspectives, because I don't think they necessarily know what's going on in our head. But that's my however many cents.
So I pretty much felt the same way about the book as Lydia and Marie did, and I really enjoyed doing the buddy read with them. I'm also doing a buddy read with Andrew from Grumpy Andrew's Horror House, and we're reading Sacrament by Clive Barker, really taking our time with it. And then I'm also planning a new buddy read with E.D. Lewis. So I've got a lot of buddy reads planned and looking forward to that. So before I wrap this up, I wanted to mention that this week Amazon is launching Kindle Vella, which is an episodic story app where you can read serial stories. And I have a story on there. It's called Starlex. It's my fantasy science fiction drama epic story. Interstellar drama, I'm calling it. And that is going to be available this week when Vella launches. And you can read the first 3 episodes for free. And then if you want to keep going, you buy tokens. This is how it works. And so I have the whole story written. I actually have 2 seasons written. So this is my first foray into doing kind of episodic storytelling. So I'm really excited. I hope you check it out. I belong to a couple Facebook groups of authors that are launching on Vella, and there are about 2,000 of us, I think, so far. So let me know in the comments below if you plan to check out Vella, or maybe you're an author and you have some story on there. I would love to know about that. Before I wrap up this video, I did want to mention that there is an interview on Typical Books, Lydia Peever's site, Horror Fiction Unbound, between Lydia and myself. It is in 2 parts, and I believe both parts are active now. I will link it below if you want to check that out. I would really appreciate it. I hope that you have a great couple of weeks, and if you want to check in Instagram and see how I'm doing and drop me a line, I would love to hear from you. So that's all I have for today. Thanks for stopping by my haunted library, and I'll see you soon. Bye!